When Delta Force was founded in 1977, it quietly refused to carry the Army's standard rifle, setting a pattern that would echo for decades. While the conventional military trusted the M16 and later the M4, Delta's armorers built their own carbines in secret, prioritizing speed and reliability over standardization. Why did America's top counter-terror unit distrust weapons the rest of the Army was forced to use? The answer reveals a divide that shapes every battle they fight, and it all begins with the decisions made in those early years. Delta Force's first operational choices set them apart from the rest of the Army almost immediately. When the unit stood up at Fort Bragg in 1977, its earliest operators faced a problem. The Army's standard-issue M16A2 rifle was long, heavy, and awkward in the tight corners and cramped hallways that defined their missions. These were not open-field firefights. Delta's world was indoors, hostage rescues, rapid assaults, and room-to-room movement where every second and every inch mattered. Instead of accepting the standard rifle, Delta's armorers turned to the Colt Model 723, a carbine-sized variant often called the KR-15. With its shorter barrel and collapsible stock, the 723 offered a level of maneuverability the M16. A two simply could not match. Operators could bring the weapon up faster, transition from target to target without snagging on doorways, and keep control during high-speed entries. The reduced length shaved precious moments off every movement, an advantage measured not in theory, but in the split-second decisions that determined life or death. This was not a matter of preference. The choice was driven by the demands of close-quarters battle. Early Delta teams found that the Army's priorities, range, standardization, and mass production clashed with the realities of their missions. They needed rifles that moved with them, not against them. So from the start, Delta's armorers built and modified carbines in-house, laying the groundwork for a culture where the mission, not the manual, dictated the gear. That willingness to break from Army doctrine became the unit's signature, one that would shape every generation of weapons to come. Inside Delta Force's compound at Fort Bragg, a small team of armorers worked with a freedom no ordinary Army unit could imagine. Backed by USSOCOM's separate budget and procurement authority, these craftsmen could bypass the Army's standard supply chain entirely. If an off-the-shelf rifle did not fit Delta's needs, the shop could order parts directly from manufacturers, or even design their own modifications in-house. This autonomy was not just about getting new gear faster. It meant Delta could experiment, iterate, and field test upgrades years before the rest of the military caught on. The technical skill inside the weapon shop allowed for constant evolution. Free-floating barrels, improved triggers, and custom rails appeared on Delta rifles long before such features became standard in Army inventories. If a new optic or suppressor showed promise, the armorers could mount and test it within days, not years. When the Army introduced the M9 pistol in 1985, Delta's operators kept carrying hand-built 1911 pistols and 45 ACP, trusting the weapons their own gunsmiths had tuned for reliability and accuracy. That same independence later led them to adopt Glock pistols, again sidestepping the Army's official choice. This pattern, enabled by legal carve-outs in procurement law and a dedicated funding stream, created a cycle. Identify a shortfall, find or build a better tool, and put it in operators' hands without waiting for Army approval. Over decades, this machinery turned Delta's Armory into a proving ground, one where the mission always dictated the weapon, never the other way around. Direct impingement and piston-driven rifles may look similar from the outside, but their internal mechanics set them worlds apart. In a direct impingement system like the Army's M4A1, hot propellant gas is routed straight from the barrel into the bolt carrier group. Each shot sends a blast of carbon-laden gas deep into the heart of the action, coating moving parts with residue and raising temperatures rapidly. The result is a cycle. More rounds fired means more fouling, more heat, and a higher chance that grit or dust will turn into a stoppage at the worst possible moment. Piston-driven rifles like the HK4-16 break this cycle by venting gas into a separate piston assembly above the barrel. Instead of flooding the receiver with hot gas, the piston physically drives the bolt back, keeping most of the fouling and heat away from the action. This separation is not just theoretical. Side-by-side endurance tests have shown the difference in real numbers. In the Army's 2007 extreme dust test, M4 carbines recorded 882 stoppages across 10 rifles, while the piston-driven HK4 and 16 logged only 233. That is nearly a four-fold reduction in malfunctions under identical, sand-choked conditions. For operators who train with 2,500 to 3,000 rounds a week, the math is unforgiving. Even a small increase in fouling translates to a weapon that needs constant cleaning or risks failing during a mission. The piston system's ability to isolate heat and debris from the bolt carrier is not a minor tweak. It is the dividing line between a rifle that runs and one that chokes. For Delta's armorers and ballisticians, these numbers turned abstract engineering into hard operational choices. Night after night in Iraq, Delta operators pushed their rifles harder than any standard infantryman ever would. Training cycles demanded 2,500 to 3,000 live rounds per week, not counting the ammunition spent during real raids in Baghdad and Ramadi. The direct impingement M4A1, built for lighter use, quickly revealed its limits. Carbon fouling from the gas system built up inside the bolt carrier, turning routine missions into a gamble. Failures to extract, failures to feed, and bolt overrides struck without warning, sometimes in the middle of a room clearance, where a jammed rifle meant a teammate had to cover the gap with pistol fire. Delta's armorers tracked every malfunction. Patterns emerged. Rifles that ran clean at the start of a week would choke by Friday, even with meticulous maintenance. The causes were not mysterious: dust, heat, and the relentless pace of operations. But the consequences were immediate and personal. Operators recalled stoppages that froze them behind cover, forced desperate tap rack drills, or left them switching to sidearms in the tightest corners of an Iraqi safe house. The margin for error was measured in heartbeats. The response was swift and unsentimental. Armorers began working with Heckler & Koch on piston-driven prototypes, fielding early HK416 rifles in small numbers by 2004. These test rifles ran for thousands of rounds with only basic cleaning, shrugging off the fouling that crippled M4A1 rifles under the same conditions. Operators reported a dramatic drop in stoppages during both training and live raids. For Delta, the data was not just a chart, it was the difference between a mission completed and a mission compromised. The Army's new M7 rifle tips the scales at 8.4 pounds unloaded, a full 2 pounds heavier than the M4A1. That difference is more than a number on a spec sheet. For an operator, every ounce matters. The switch to 6.8 by 51mm ammunition compounds the problem. Each round is nearly twice as heavy as 5.56mm, and the standard combat load drops from 210 rounds to just 140 for the same weight carried. Fewer rounds mean fewer chances in a firefight, and the extra weight slows movement through tight spaces. The load on the soldier's back grows, while the number of shots available shrinks. In a world where speed and sustained fire are the edge, these calculations are not academic. They define what is possible when the mission starts. Recoil isn't just a number on a chart. It is a force that shapes every decision in a gunfight. The M7's heavier 6.8 by 51mm cartridge brings a sharp kick, pushing the rifle off target and making each follow-up shot slower and harder to control. In close quarters battle, where Delta's doctrine demands lightning-fast split times and tight shot groups under pressure, even a tenth of a second lost between rounds can tip the balance. Ballistics experts and trainers have measured split times on heavier rifles like the M7 lagging by 2 to 3 tenths of a second compared to the HK416 or M4A1. That gap might sound small, but in a room full of threats, it is the difference between staying ahead of the fight or falling behind. For Delta Force, the verdict is simple. Controllability wins. That is why Tier 1 units stick with piston-driven carbines, keeping speed and precision at the core of their arsenal. Today, Delta Force still arms itself by its own rules. As the Army fields heavier rifles for future wars, America's most elite operators quietly stick with what wins in real combat. Sometimes, the difference between standard and exceptional is measured in lives, not regulations. Let's hear your take below.